Well, you asked for it, and here it is. Today, we're going to talk about Magneto. Magneto has been in a very, very good spot in the meta the entire time that the game's been around. He's fallen off a little bit, but he hasn't seen a whole lot of large, swinging, impactful changes to his kit in any way. And I think that's because overall, he is implemented really, really well and is very versatile in how he would work. Now, I have some thoughts on things that I would change about his kit in terms of what he currently has, but the nature of this series has been to work in a new kind of ability. And while he does have a passive in his magnetic descent, where he can slowly descend from higher elevations, I think that there is another passive that is being overlooked that we really, really need to implement. So his kit is very basic but broad in its application in terms of that magnetism manipulation. There's some creative liberty given with that in terms of like his ultimate where he can absorb projectiles. It's pretty broad to all kind of projectiles, not just ones that are metal or metal adjacent. Astral projection, that's a weird thing to try and implement in the game. And genius level intellect is also hard to appropriately implement. But the psychic shield via helmet is really one thing that hasn't been applied at all in his kit in game. Now, admittedly, not every skin that he has actually shows him with that helmet on. Of course, his base costume does, and a handful of his other alternate costumes do. It's a very well-known, quintessential, iconic look for him, but there are a handful of characters who don't have that helmet in place, so you would have to give it a little bit of some creative liberty and forgiveness in terms of not having the visual aspect impact the applied effect of having a passive linked to his helmet. I think that the passive that would need to be applied to reflect that psychic shield via helmet should be a passive that does two separate things. One, it should render him immune to some of the niche conditions in the game. Primarily, Emma's psychic seduction. If you get hit with that, you should not be compelled to move against your will based off of being overpowered psychically, because that helmet directly inhibits that from happening, and I'd love for eventually Juggernaut to have that same kind of ability baked into his kit. I'm assuming they'll add him at one point or another. He seems like a fairly obvious choice to me, but we'll cover that at a later date. And the other thing, which I think would be an additionally appropriate effect to have rolled into that same passive, is something along the lines of, or similar to Jeff's Oblivious Cuteness ability. I don't think it needs to be as aggressive as his critical reduction is, even though that just got scaled back. But a 20 to 30% reduction in critical hit damage, I think, would be appropriate and fitting and thematic within what that helmet helps with. I don't know whether or not that should extend over to Phoenix's Sparks as well, but if you have other kind of abilities that heavily rely on that psychic interference, whether or not they eventually implement someone like Charles Xavier into the game, those type abilities should be rendered moot by the presence of Magneto wearing a helmet, even if his skin and his cosmetic doesn't actively show and demonstrate that. But what do you think? Is there something else that you would like to see implemented in Magneto's kit, or if he were to get a new ability, passive or otherwise, what do you think that should be? I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are, and we'll see you for the next Vanguard tomorrow.